Welcome back to National Geographic. I'm your host for today's episode, Faizan Sheikh, and here we will cover current events from an anthropological perspective. Anthropology focuses on how behaviors in the past of humans have affected our present norms and values. The impacts of anthropology, like culture and language alterations, can be taken into consideration when analyzing everything, especially today's US election. In light of the results, we are going to be covering them from multiple anthropological perspectives, demonstrating how anthropologic schools of thought, race, gender roles, and nationalism all impact and are impacted by the narrative of the US elections. Before we begin exploring perspectives, know that they are all important and all interconnected in terms of the election. However, some are much more relevant than others. First, the perspective most relevant for the events prior to the 2020 election, including the build-up to result in polarization in political views, is social evolutionism. If we look far back into ancient Mesopotamia, one of the first urban civilizations in the world, which existed around the 4th millennium BCE. Through social interactions in particular, so they can assign roles in their agricultural-focused society, a government and state system were formed. Governments were also formed in many other ancient civilizations. However, most of these governments were autocratic, meaning one person had absolute power. As time passed, people started to demand more rights and greater say in their lives. This continuous evolution through social interaction eventually gave rise to modern-day democracy. Social interaction is continuing to play a big part and will with no doubt influence the future of how society is governed. The election of a president, as well as a political party, to govern a country is rooted in a central area of social evolutionism, which states, social evolution is the result of group selection, meaning competition between groups, in this case, competition between the Democrats and the Republicans. And this is organized according to rules. In this case, the rules would be the rules of the election and even unwritten rules that will be recognized when referring to racial prejudice and gender roles in the election, and all these are selected on the basis of functional adaptation. Additionally, this group selection is affected by expressed socialism, which now, due to social evolutionism, is much more prevalent, especially through social media. Polarization of political views can be impacted to a high degree by opinion dynamics, in which citizens of America evaluate alternative political beliefs subsequent to their social feedback. For example, an entire social environment around a person is telling them they should vote for Biden, and stating justification for them to not vote for Trump. Then, assuming in this case they initially supported Trump, they will often reevaluate and contemplate whether their first decision was correct. Further, social evolutionism throughout history has altered the narrative for the elections in terms of how race, gender roles, nationalism have impacted and is impacted by the elections. These factors all are interconnected with functionalism, in which the aspects are more suitable in the heart of Washington, D.C. right now, after the election results where Biden has won have just been announced. On to you, L.
Thanks, Faizan. We can see here that all around the area there are countless people who are happy for Biden's victory, as well as numerous people all over social media where their names can be easily identified also supporting Biden's victory. Keep this in mind for the anthropological theoretical perspective most relevant to now, after the election results have been released, which is the theory of functionalism. Functionalism is a theory that all aspects of a society serve a function and are necessary for the survival and prosperity of that society. According to the functionalism theory, the government has four main purposes: planning society, meeting social needs, maintaining law and order, and managing international relations, which is affected by who these people have come together to elect today. First, we of course know that everyone plays a role in the elections, which mostly entails supporting a side and voting for them. Prior to the election, throughout all types of media, support for Biden was immense, while support for Trump was extremely low. This decidedly induced the citizens and the media, even including myself, to predict Biden's victory as won by a countless margin of votes. In reality, although the functioning electoral system meaning the majority of people with similar values who came together to elect Joe Biden, we have just received word that he has only won by a small margin. This demonstrates that in this social society, political support was greatly influenced, which can be interpreted by conflict theory, a part of the functionalism perspective. Conflict theory focuses on social inequalities within a group, frequently developing subgroups of a larger group, where the large group has power among the subgroups. Conflicts in the election are driven by desires to protect power, have freedom, and especially have everyone abide by one's own values. In this election, and especially in the 2016 election, it seemed like extremely few people were supporting Trump, yet he won in 2016 and was close to winning in this 2020 election. From an anthropological perspective, we can explain why he had so many votes using the conflict theory in functionalism. So, human beings always try to maintain appearances in society with what is politically correct. That's just the way we are. In this instance, supporting Donald Trump condones his policies and characteristics that are publicly looked down upon by most in America. For example, his publicly affirmed racism, white supremacy, homophobia, xenophobia, and harassment. But this is how they really feel. Most people will be afraid to support Trump, as they are worried about what others may think. Many would rather even deny the possibility of even voting for Trump to others. But in the voting system, where you can remain anonymous, support for Donald Trump is substantial, so much so that he won in 2016 and only lost by a small margin in this year's election. Other circumstances play a role in the close voting poll, but regardless, functionalism absolutely plays a key role in why, despite low social support for him, he's still surprisingly obtaining countless support in the election. The functionalist perspective views society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidarity, so supporting Biden in public and supporting Trump in secret causes stability. Take the protests, for example. Here's a clip from a 2016 broadcast where protesters were furious after Trump's victory.
Overnight protesters hit the streets from coast to coast. Seattle, Chicago, New York. Thousands of people marched in at least 10 cities, speaking out against President-elect Donald Trump.